Toronto's housing market is very sluggish. There's a ton of uncertainty in the market, a ton of economic uncertainty in Canada with everything going on between Canada-US relations. How will this impact the economy? How will this impact the housing market? And one of the most common questions I get from our clients is how do they navigate this market? Many people who need to buy a home or want to buy a home are trying to navigate this volatile market, are trying to understand how do they make better real estate decisions? How do their strategies and approach to this market differ from what buyers were used to doing 2 years ago when the market is busy? And this is what I want to talk about today. Kind of the top three things I think buyers needs to be doing differently in today's less certain and more volatile market to make a good decision and potentially to find some value in a sluggish market. For those of you new to the channel, my name is John Pasalis. My team and I help buyers and sellers throughout the Toronto area make smarter and more informed real estate decisions. Of course, if you want to chat with me and my team about your own personal real estate decisions, you could just click the link in the show notes below or send me an email at askjohn@movesmartly.com. So before I dig into some of the tips I think buyers should be thinking about and using going forward, I'll just say that I'm going to be also hosting a private information session, a quick 30-minute session for people who need to buy and sell in this market. There are quite a few more risks when you're trying to time two transactions at once. So I thought I'd do a separate little information session for that for people who want to think about the common pitfalls and risks when you're trying to time two transactions at once. So if you're interested in that, just click in the link in the show notes below for that session. So today's session is not a home buying 101 course. It is not sort of the steps you need to do to buy a home. This is specifically about some of the things, just a few things that I think buyers need to be doing differently. In the Toronto area, we're used to a market that is busy. Most agents are only used to a market where prices are rising, where homes get multiple offers. And many people are not used to a market that is sluggish, a market that in many areas and types of homes is in a buyer's market territory. We're not familiar with how to navigate these changing dynamics and how to make smarter real estate decisions and how to use this slowdown to our benefit as buyers. So I thought I'd kind of touch on some of the key things that I think we need to be doing differently if we're navigating this market as buyers, if we're looking at buying a home to find some value. And the first thing I'll say is, I mean, if you're a buyer out there, you're looking at buying a home, you've toured some homes, and you've found a property that you want to bid on. You know, the next step most buyers and their agents take is, of course, to draft up an offer, prepare their terms, and submit it to the seller and their agent. And I'd say this is the first mistake buyers are doing. The first step before you submit your offer is that your agent needs to pick up the phone. They need to call the seller's agents to understand a little bit more of the property and the seller's motivations. And I think this is a critical thing to do because in this market where things are very slow, you oftentimes will get sellers agents who will just spill everything out to you. They'll tell you how eager their clients are to sell, how desperate they are. They'll tell you if they're willing to take way under asking. They'll tell you stuff that they typically shouldn't be telling you. And again, the top 10% of agents don't do this. They're going to keep their cards close to their chest, but the 90% of agents or 85% who are new, don't sell a lot of homes, are struggling in this market, are going to give you a ton of information about the seller, whether they bought a home or not, whether they're in a rush to sell, whether they need to sell, their motivation, they'll just tell you a ton of information. And this is critical if you're a buyer looking to get some value in this market. And I say that agents need to pick up the phone because, again, in today's market, most agents aren't used to doing that. Everyone texts, everyone emails, everyone doesn't communicate by picking up the telephone and having a conversation. But these are conversations that you can only have over the phone. No agent, even the worst, kind of performers out there are not going to be sending you emails and texts telling you how motivated their clients are. No one wants to really document that. But over the telephone, they'll tell you, they'll let you know, they'll kind of, and you'll hear it in their voice and their tone and all of that. So you want more information as a buyer. You want to know how motivated, how anxious, how eager the seller is of the home that you're looking at buying, because this will inform your offer. If you sense that they are in a bind, that they need to sell, that they've bought a home already, and they have to sell this home in order to close on the next one, as a buyer, you can be a little bit more aggressive. You can kind of take advantage of this slow market. You can take advantage of the fact that their home isn't selling. They're not getting tons of offers or any offers to your advantage when drafting of an offer. So again, the first thing is you need to get as much information from the seller's agent about their clients, their motivation. And again, maybe the top 15% will not give you very much, but a lot of agents will. And not every seller is going to be motivated, for the record. Some will. But again, if we are the buyers in these situations, we want to know if that is a situation we're entering into, because we want to use this information when we are negotiating. Now, the second thing I'll say that buyers needs to be prepared for and mindful of is that you should not be shy about making lowball offers in this market. Again, I think by a lowball offer, I mean, of course, an offer that is either way less than the seller's asking price or less than even sometimes the market value of the home. And I'm not saying you go out and make lowball offers everywhere. You need to be strategic. For example, again, in a situation where even if a home's priced fairly and it's been sitting on the market for a while and you sense that the seller is motivated, why wouldn't you go in with a price that is below market value to see how motivated the sellers are? At the end of the day, these are tactics that we're using and approaches to represent buyer clients, to use this information to our advantage, to find some value, to get a discount from market value. So you want to use that. But even in cases where the home is not sort of desperate, the seller isn't desperate. Sometimes homes are overpriced and are sitting on the market, and buyers are just reluctant to make offers on them because they don't want to make an offer that is significantly below the asking price. And I think, when we think about why, from my experience, why a lot of agents don't want to do that, I think part of it is I think a lot of agents are not used to a market where you're paying under asking. I think a lot of agents are newer. They don't sell a lot of homes. They're used to markets where you basically pay over asking all the time. So they're not used to an environment where you're going in 10% under the asking price because it is a slow market, because they're overpriced. So they're not, number one is they're not used to that, I'd say. The second reason, from my experience, and I've been doing this a long time, and I'd say this is not even about realtors. I mean, I've seen this tendency even when I'm dealing with lawyers in negotiations, where some people are anxious going in with an aggressively low price because they're worried about a confrontation. And what happens sometimes in this business is if you go with a lowball offer, sellers, agents might call you back and harass you and yell you and kind of talk down to you about how you're insulting their clients and be very aggressive. And again, these are a lot of old school agents that would do this. And this makes some buyers agents reluctant because they don't want to be in this situation where they're going to put themselves in that position. A lot of people don't like confrontation. They don't want to be yelled at. They're very anxious. They want to kind of go safe and not put themselves in that situation. And I've seen this in so many cases. A lot of times when I'm negotiating things personally and I notice that someone that's working for me is taking a certain approach, I realize that they're doing that because they don't want a ton of confrontation. They kind of want a smooth path in the negotiation. So sometimes you actually need to drive the negotiations yourself if you're dealing with someone who is anxious. Like a lot of people in this market maybe have a friend or a family member who's their agent, they're kind of stuck working with them. And if you're in that situation, you need to be driving the negotiation sometimes if you find that they're a little bit anxious about making aggressive offers. And again, I'm not saying you just go in and lowball every property, but again, sometimes if you sense that the seller is motivated and eager and needs to sell, why wouldn't you go in way under? And especially in a situation where a home's ridiculously overpriced, why not go in below? I mean, we had a situation recently, a client of ours, the seller's agent, kept talking about how their client's bottom line price is 1.4 million. They are trying to argue that this was the property's for. We didn't buy that thesis. We came in at well under, and our clients ended up buying it for basically 10% under what the seller's agent told us they needed. So 1.25 instead of 1.4. They got good value, and we moved forward. But a lot of agents are reluctant to make an offer that is significantly under, $150,000 under what the agent says that the seller wants. So in this market, I think you have to be a little bit aggressive. Hopefully you have an agent that is aggressive. If not, you have to drive the negotiations. And in some cases, go in low to find a little bit of value. Be strategic about the ones you do it. Obviously, homes that have multiple offers, you're not going to have that option. But homes that have been on the market for a while that are overpriced, and where you get a little bit of information, and since the seller's motivated, you shouldn't be shy about making aggressive offers to try to find a little bit more value. So that's the second thing. The last thing I'd say relates to, and we cannot end this conversation, of course, without talking about the condo market. And buyers in this market need to be very cautious when it comes to the condo market. There's a ton of uncertainty and volatility. And the one thing I'd say, and piece of advice is, if you're buying a condo in this market, you want to be very mindful about the building you are buying in. Now, a lot of people think about the condo market as a whole and are worried, well, what if prices fall? That's a very reasonable consideration. But the important thing you need to think about is that when we as agents and when our clients are looking at making an offer on a condominium, right? We typically look at comparable sales for that condo. And when we look at comparable sales for that condo, we look at comparable sales in that specific building. You don't compare one building to another one that's a kilometer down the road or even another one across the street, because the price per square foot are very different. The amenities are different. They're very different buildings. So when we look at comparables, we're looking at comparables in the exact same building to see what other similar units sold for. So if you are buying a unit, you ideally want to buy a unit, preferably in one that will hold up a little bit better. And those are probably buildings that are disproportionately end user buildings with slightly larger units, that target basically end users rather than investors. These big monster buildings that have, 500 condos and they're all micro 500 square feet or 550 square feet, and they're all geared towards investors that are going to rent them out, are probably going to be far more vulnerable for a price decline when compared to smaller, more boutique, more niche buildings that are geared towards end users, right? So even in a market, if condo prices fall, say 10, 15%, what that means is probably those buildings that are highly concentrated with investors might fall 20%, whereas the end user building might fall maybe 5%. And again, this is not a prediction. I have no idea where prices are going to be. But the point is, when we think about the change in prices going forward, if condo prices are down 10 or 50%, doesn't mean every building is down that much. Some buildings will decline more than others. So if you want to make a smart, informed, safe decision, you want to buy in a building that is probably going to hold its value better than other buildings. And I'd say the big difference right now, and the more vulnerable ones, are the buildings that are really geared towards investors, where the vast majority of units are tiny. There isn't a lot of difference between the units, and most of them are being rented out. And I'd say those are the buildings that you want to be really cautious of and probably avoid, while you focus on some of the more boutique and niche buildings that are geared towards end users. So hopefully you found that helpful. If you have any questions, you can please post them in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer, or just shoot me an email at askjohn@movesmartly.com.